as though they are hunting through the forest with their bows and arrows, and they pretend that they're going to kill an elephant, for example. And then they all jump around, dance around in a circle, happy that they have killed the big elephant in the forest. Today, boys and girls, we've talked a little bit about pygmies and gorillas. What do you think are the most important differences in the pygmies' way of life and in the gorillas' way of life? How they dress, what they eat, their shelter, and their nest. I hope you enjoyed our lesson today on pygmies and gorillas. Until next time, this is Miss Matson saying goodbye for now.
This is WVIZ, TV 25 in Cleveland.
Boom, 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 apple pie and mama's cooking, truly American. Boom, 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 rich, poor, black, white, how you look, you can make it if American. Just do your stuff and do it well. Lots before us did it and we think they're swell. It's the spirit of America, the people, they're truly American. They're truly American.
Do you ever dream of being a great athlete? I did, and still do. Of course, many of us dream about it, but only few of us ever really make it to the top of the sports world. Now, one person who did was the American Indian, Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe had such tremendous natural ability and such fierce determination to win that he, in his time, was considered to be the greatest athlete in the world. He excelled in just about every sport there is, and he was especially terrific in football and track. And so it was natural for Jim Thorpe to be the very first athlete ever inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio in 1963. I visited the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where I met and talked with author Bob Wheeler, a man who spent 7 long years traveling all over the United States researching and writing Jim Thorpe's life story. Now, in his travels, he interviewed many people who knew Jim personally and others who had actually competed against him on the field. And this is what happened. You know, Bob, I think this statue of Jim Thorpe has such tremendous impact. You walk through those front doors and there it stands, and I'm telling you, it really gets to you. I'm really impressed. Okay, continuing our conversation about Jim Thorpe, let's start at the very beginning. Let's talk about his ancestry. I'm sure you know a lot about that.
Well, Jim's great-grandfather was Chief Black Hawk of the Sac and Fox tribe. Black Hawk's daughter, Notenaquay, married an Irish fur trapper by the name of Hiram Thorpe, and these two people created the union that bore Jim's father, Hiram Jr. The morning that Jim was born was a spring morning toward the end of the month of May at 6:30 in the morning. As the mother gave birth to the child, her first sight was the pathway in front of her cabin resplendent with the sunlight, hence the name Bright Path, or in Sac and Fox, Wathohuck.
You know, talking about his boyhood, Bob, I understand he once played hooky.
Yes, he was quite a cantankerous youth in terms of wanting to be hunting and fishing and playing games of hide and seek, for example, or tag, or follow the leader, which were quite different than those that the young people know today. In terms of follow the leader, for example, meant fording a stream, climbing to the top of a fir tree, swinging down, climbing over the top of a barn and sliding down the other side of the roof, running under animals and this sort of thing.
You know, when I was growing up, I played follow the leader too, but nothing like that.
Right. Well, this was the type of experience, the outdoor activity that he loved. The confines of the classroom, plus the recent death of his brother. These two factors put the thought in Jim's mind that schooling was not something that he wanted to do, and he wanted to be with his dad, the person that he idolized. So on the day in question, he ran home, was greeted by the father at the door, this being a distance of 18 miles. The father, seeing Jim, immediately drove him back to the school with a team of horses in the truck, in the buckboard, and deposited him at the front of the school. And as the father left, and as Jim entered the school, he exited by the back. And as the dad took the buckboard 23 miles over the road, again, Jim knew the shortcut, the 18-mile pathway back to the house. And at this point, he greeted the father upon his return.
Boy, that's a real game of hooky.
It sure was. And because of this, Jim's next school was in Lawrence, Kansas, 270 miles away.
You know, that was even a little too far for Jim Thorpe.
No, on the contrary, 2 years later, upon learning of an illness that his father had suffered, Jim walked, taking nearly a month, the 270 miles from Lawrence, Kansas, back to Oklahoma.
Bob, at what stage of his young life did he begin to develop his athletic abilities, his fierce sense of competition?
Well, having the twin brother, this was developed at an early age, but the first recorded incident that I think is significant occurred when Jim was 8 years old, which was the time that he bagged his first deer. And then by the time that he was 15, he made the statement that there wasn't a horse on the range that he couldn't catch, saddle, and ride.
Now, when Jim Thorpe was 19 years old, he entered Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. That was 1907? Of course, we're all aware of his incredible career at Carlisle. Would you tell us about it?
Well, it began in 1907, as you say, and went into 1908, and then there was the gap of 2 years, and then it concluded in 1911 and 1912. The last 2 years, Jim made first-team All-American, as selected by Walter Camp, as the finest football player in the nation. And I think an important point to list at this time is the fact that Carlisle Indian School was a technical school for high school students. Indian boys who had never played football before, and yet they were competing favorably and in most instances in a superior fashion against the top powers of the day, West Point, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton.
Of course, a big part of that reason was Jim Thorpe.
That's right.
Can you a little more specifically identify some of his feats performed on the gridiron?
Well, I think his most famous game occurred against West Point in 1912. November the 11th, and the score was 27-6 against the top team in the nation, West Point. And on this team, a young cadet, a backfield person by the name of Dwight Eisenhower performed.
He can do everything everybody else can do. Anybody else can do it, he can do it better. And we saw him just without the slightest form, just put the football on his foot and kick it up 60 yards and punt. There's no trouble at all. We were standing back there, it looked like from 75 yards. He just boomed the ball, wasn't firing or anything else, just boomed down there. That's all it was. And you throw the ball, you run, you tackle, you do anything.
And on one instant, he had double-teamed him with his backfield mate, a man by the name of Benedict, and they were going to high-low Jim. One hit him high and one hit him low. Well, at the point that they were supposed to do this, Jim stopped short. The two banged heads and were taken out of the game groggy. Jim, of course, went on down the field. But the interesting thing is that there have been many reports that this ended Eisenhower's